Hello and welcome back to Story Glimpse. Today we're going to go over a story called Out to Lunch. Now, if the Fey Council was after you, would your magic hideaway be enough? Stay tuned. And this is Story Glimpse. I'm Weston Kincade, bestselling horror and mystery author. If you'd like to find out about my books, follow the links below. Or if you'd like to leave a message or find out about upcoming episodes, be sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell. Today's story is Out to Lunch. Dane lifted the cup of coffee to his tousled gray beard and took a sip, his corncob pipe hanging between two fingers. Tendrils of smoke wafted up to the dance amongst the antlers and stuffed animal heads mounted on the walls. This room had once been a lowly pub, and the bar and shelves behind still held the stained wood fashion. "Hey, Doc, how do you do that?" asked Seymour, a local handyman who commonly scrounged for money and alcohol. At this time of morning, he recently made stopping in at Dane's taxidermy a daily ritual. Seymour motioned toward the still-burning corncob pipe between the store owner's pinched knuckles. Without glancing at the man seated across the stained wood bar, Dane answered, "With the willpower of a roosting chicken moose." Seymour guffawed. "Them are those sayings I love. You heard when I said that last?" "Yes, I heard you, Seymour," Dane interrupted. "You said it not 10 minutes ago, the last time I answered one of your bumbling questions." To anyone who didn't know him, Dane would have appeared aggravated, like a miffed Gandalf after a squirrel ran laps through his underpants. What they wouldn't realize is that this was also part of the daily routine. "I was just saying," Seymour mumbled, running his thumb beneath a strap in his overalls nervously. "I know. So sorry." Dane lost interest and sat staring through the smoke trails spinning up from his pipe. The two sat in silence for a moment, sipping black coffee as a few stray rays of sunshine struggled through the yellowed windows fronting the shop. Old dark floral carpet from the previous century held down the floorboards, and about as much dirt and dust. Dane's musty sanctuary was lofted high, but everywhere you looked were animal skins and other taxidermy. Bears, cougars, leopards, rabbits, fish, and an assortment from other beasts. Dane had called it home for the better part of his life, and it was a living. He couldn't complain, especially considering his clientele. "Seen the new visitors yet?" Seymour asked. Visitors were rare in this rural town. The mention of them piqued Dane's interest, but he tempered his enthusiasm. "And who would that be?" he asked. Emptying his pipe into a well-used gold-plated antique ashtray, Dane pulled out a leather pouch full of pipe tobacco and refilled the corncob. Seymour shrugged and took another sip of his steaming coffee. "Not sure. Can't miss 'em, though." "How's that?" Seymour smiled to himself. "Oh, you'll know." Suddenly, a clatter of what sounded like hooves reverberated off the old wooden planks of the porch outside Dane's taxidermy. From the faded red paint flecks that remained on the rough timbers, most would think the porch was original to the antique building. It could have been right out of the Wild West. Dane swiveled in his seat to stare at his front door. A dark humanoid shape stood just outside, visible through the old glass. But only just. "Who's that?" he asked the room. Neither animal nor human answered. Glancing around, Dane was at a momentary loss. Seymour had vanished, unwashed smell and all. "Seymour?" His voice echoed as though in a padded room until the old wooden front door creaked open and a raven-haired middle-aged woman stood staring at him with curls down to her waist. "Dane Devonshire Tupetto, where the heck have you been?" asked the busty woman in a voice that could not only have rounded up every herd of cattle in the county, but also every man. "I barely recognize you." Dane grinned knowingly. "Been right here, Murin, you temptress. What is that standing behind you, anyways?" Murin smiled and gave her dark hair a quick toss. "Wouldn't you like to know?" "I meant the mount," Dane interjected with a nod behind her. Murin smiled, and an old spark lit within her dark eyes. "So did I." A hearty cough racked Dane at the same time as his chuckle, and he bent over, wheezing. Dane was not in the prime of his youth, not even a moderately healthy condition. His pump hadn't been primed in so long, he wasn't sure everything still worked. However, after his 600th naming day passed not too long ago, he figured it was worth a try. If not, there were doorways for that. "We could have a quick jolly or three," he added, wondering momentarily whether Seymour had actually skedaddled out the back of the restaurant. "But I don't think that's what brought you in here. Your kin don't normally make stopovers." Letting the weighty door close behind her, Muriel's husky voice answered, "True." She straddled a bar stool in an outfit black as night with palazzo pants that more closely resembled a long, flowing dress. Frills and lace decorated her blouse in such a way as to make her outfit seem fitting in the aging coffee shop. Propping her elbows on her bar top, she rested her chin in her hands. "Dane, won't you do me an itsy-bitsy favor?" Her voice was coy in an obvious attempt at seduction. "Now don't you start that, my lady," Dane growled. "I might have to take you out back for a whipping." He paused. "Get to the point." Muriel shrugged and gave a childish pout. "You know I've got your number, Muriel. Now, I wouldn't mind a bit of a tryst in the bed sheets, or even a local pond, considering, but the consequences that come with your kin's baggage aren't really to my liking." Muriel gave up and looked at him far more sternly, her doe-eyed gaze gone, as though it had never been. She was all seriousness now. "I need a ride. My steed is about run out, and I really don't have time to court another." Dane's eyes went to the floor, then his pipe, which was newly lit. He said not a word. "Please, Dane," she added, sincerity audible in her tone. "You know what they'll do if I ever let one out," he muttered morosely. She shook her head. "The board doesn't have to know. We could—" "Where's your cap?" Dane interrupted. Muriel's eyes widened momentarily, then her gaze fell to the floor. "No wonder you're here looking for my help. Seymour said you were here, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the mountains all around us. Never thought I'd see the day you came to me without your cap." "Seymour?" Muriel questioned. "Who? I haven't been here. I just arrived." The sputtering response jogged Dane's mind. He hadn't had to think so fast in at least 100 years. "Down," he shouted as the shop's magical defenses blared out an alarm only he could hear. His pipe surreptitiously disappeared into a pocket as he swept Muriel under a table, visibly shrinking in the process. As a woof of exploding air shattered the yellow windows, shards of glass spiraled into the room. Animal heads were shredded and impaled, the bar littered with jagged shrapnel, and empty liquor bottles on the shelves behind it detonated. "Damn you, Seymour, you knew!" Dane swore beneath his breath. The story the old drunk had told of needing a jackalope stuffed had to have been a ploy. Something had itched at the back of Dane's neck about the story, but nothing had otherwise seemed amiss. Dane was losing his edge. If he wasn't careful, carelessness would be the end of him. "Knew what?" Muriel hissed from inches away. Dane held up a miniature hand, fingers splayed. "Wait here." He hesitated a moment, then stepped out from the table's protection. His 3-foot bearded form stared up at yet another stranger. This one stepped in through the large shattered window. "There you are, Daney," muttered another female voice. Her face was hidden beneath a hood and traveler's cape, but something within emanated briefly. "I've been looking for you." Her tone seemed caught between hatred and passion, and whatever it promised would only make a demon happy. "Hasn't everyone?" Dane asked, shaking his head. "When it rains, it pours." Before he could say anything more, a bolt of lightning shot from her fingertips. Dane barely reached the nearest table in time to avoid becoming the first halfling toaster strudel, extra crispy. He leapt from beneath one table to the next, slapping them down to protect him and Muriel. "How the hell did she find me?" Muriel asked. "Oh, Danny boy, come out, wherever you are," the hooded woman sang while stepping through the old coffee taxidermy shop's remains. She kicked over one table, then another. "I've got a surprise for you." "I don't think she's here for you," Dane told Muriel. Their eyes met. "What did you do?" she hissed. He sputtered. "Nothing, really. Look, it was a long time ago. It didn't mean anything." Murin's eyes widened into dark orbs. Even the whites were tinged red with rage. "And to think I ever entertained getting back together with you!" she erupted from their hiding spot, sending the table tumbling into a wall. "Me!" Dane shouted back. His voice squeaked, at a slightly higher pitch than before his transformation. "What about you? You came here looking for me. And what was all that about mounting up and whatnot? Have a tryst or three?" Suddenly Dane was fully aware of their audience. Beneath the cowl, 2 orange eyes peered out with glee. In their depths, her irises were dark, vertical slits. The stranger giggled while blue lightning crackled between her fingers. "I haven't had this much fun in ages," she said as Dane paused to stare. Both women seemed ready to gouge his eyes out with nothing more than a baleful gaze. Murin held up a finger to the newcomer. "Wait till I'm done, then he's all yours." A glint of anger registered in the woman's eyes. She clearly did not like taking orders. The lightning within her grasp began circling her hands as she brought them together. It caught Murin's attention for a moment, but she dismissed the threat. The stranger attacked, letting loose with an anger-induced streak of blue lightning. It arced toward Murin, but she lifted a gloved hand and redirected it into the wall, knocking down an antelope and zebra head. They sizzled on the musty carpet, swept up in outrage. The strange woman sent bolt after bolt. Murin redirected them and took out the stairway railing above, a chandelier made of antlers, and charred a hole through the wall separating them from the kitchen. The clang of pots and pans crashing to the tiled floor erupted from the other side. Seymour came running through the doorway, hands held over his head. He'd evidently been hiding somewhere back in the kitchen. "How?" breathed the cloaked woman, her Irish accent more clear. Murin simply held up her finger once more. "Give me a moment," she ordered with a sidelong glance. The stranger's gaze moved from Murin to Dane and back. Then she barked, "Seymour, here now!" as though he were a dog. Well trained, the large man plodded to her side and sat on the floor. "Please, Cleo," Dane said. "This isn't doing anyone any good." The name gave Murin pause. "Cleo? Cleodna?" It was the name of one she knew, a Fey deity, the queen of the banshees. Cleo gave a curt nod, then lifted her hood back. Her hair shifted from red to yellow and orange, shimmering as though made of wildfire. Murin licked her lips anxiously, her confidence fleeing at the sight. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Great One. I don't mean to stand in your way, but Dane and I have unfinished business." Cleo's face shifted into a slight grin. "It seems we both do." The gaze of both women ate into Dane, and his feet ached to find anywhere else to be, whether the rest of him came or not. "Now see here, ladies," he mumbled, backing away and stumbling over assorted furniture. Taxidermied animals and glass littered the floor. "I'm sure we can work this out. You need a mount, right?" I have a horse and buggy." Murin shook her head. "Not fast enough. That whelp out there's about to drop dead, and they're coming for me." The phrase brought a smile to Dane's face. Part of him wanted to say, "I remember when I was on that tell." But this was neither the time or occasion. The two women stalked the small man like hungry cats until a wail came from just outside. Tendrils of smoke began drifting from the steed-shaped creature until it vanished like a popped balloon. Dane grimaced. The steed had been human once, a byproduct of Murin's profession. Sirens were still renowned for their calls, but no one ever truly understood them. Myth placed sirens on craggy islands, luring in lonely sailors. Their true magic lay not in their call, but in what they did with the creatures they drew in. "Was that you?" Cleo asked Murin, uncertainty tinging her voice. The woman clad in black shook her head. "No. They're here." There was no need for clarification about who had arrived. Both knew. The Fey board members led the few Fey left living on this side of the Veil. For centuries, all sorts of Fey had fled the Fey wildlands to come here. They were the source of many ancient myth and legends. In the past, many had been Dane's clients, for he held the only key home. It was the reason he'd been hiding for so many years. Dane Devilshire Tupedo had been known by many names over the years, going back generation after generation to Kasil al-Suduni and even Sudun Taz of the Ottoman Empire, where he'd first found his calling as stablemaster. But that could all end tonight. The Fey Council never let someone go once they had them in their sights. By nightfall, Murin would be dead, thousands of years of life snuffed out in an instant, and likely Dane and Cleo too. Yes, even a deity could die. "This dispute will wait," Cleo ordered, turning to face whatever mercenaries the Fey Council had sent. Dane nodded and strode toward the charred stairway leading up, but at its base he pushed aside the wall panel. The wall slid inward to reveal a dark stairway. A translucent film wavered where the panel had been. "This won't," Murin said uncertainly, pausing in front of it. Footsteps padded up to the storefront. "Come on, time's a-wasting," Dane ordered. With a slight motion of her hand, the deity sent Seymour running across the room. He screamed unintelligibly as he leaped over the devastated window and sped out into the street. The sound of attack spells sizzled through the air, adding to the smell of burnt ozone. Using the distraction, Murin and Cleo followed Dane up the short stairs and into a hallway littered with closed doors. They looked no different from any other that might be in an aging apartment building or business, except for an Egyptian hieroglyph branded waist-high in the wooden door. Each door had a different hieroglyph. A few were even marred by deep scratches, as though something inside had gotten a handhold before being beaten back and the door closed. As they reached the top step, Cleo asked, "Where to, stable master?" It was the first time Dane had heard the old name in centuries. Although their situation was dire, it felt good to resume his old life, not just a distorted semblance of it. "We need the Pegasi." Murin shook her head. "No, too obvious. We have to hide among the humans." Dane tilted his head in thought. As though it were an afterthought, he snapped his fingers. The sound of the secret door quickly sliding shut disrupted the silence of the magic hallway. "That'll buy us a few minutes," he growled. Another snap, and a flame flared from Dane's small thumb. Murin and Cleo followed as he strode down the hall. The stablemaster stopped in front of a door with the symbol of a spiral burnt into it. "Really?" Cleo asked, sounding astonished. "We're out of time, ladies. It's gotta be lucky 100. "What will happen when they break down the door?" Murin asked. Dane glared at her. He didn't like thinking about it. This had been his home for so long, and he'd hate to lose it. "We have a few minutes," he said simply. "But what will happen to the rest of the doors?" "They'll be fine. Just have to find them again." Murin grinned in the darkness. Cleo didn't. As a deity, she had some idea of the difficulty in that task. As Dane opened the door, a gust of wind tossed their clothes and hair. Dim light filtered into the hall as the stablemaster stepped through. Inside, sunlight streamed through the many cracks of an old barn that could have housed dragons. It was enormous, but every stall looked empty. Straw covered the ground, and as the hallway door closed behind them, the sound of an entire building crumbling to the ground reverberated beneath their feet. A second later, it was gone. However, the door itself remained. "Can they get through?" Murin asked. Dane dismissed his flame and stared at the humongous barn. It dwarfed him in every way, but he'd always been master here. Glancing back at what appeared to be a simple wooden apartment door, he sighed. "Maybe. I've never dismissed a home with Fey inside. Best hurry." Heading past stall after stall, the stablemaster's gaze was set on one large stall in the back. Murin noticed odd levers sticking out of every stall door, as though a tinkerer had added his own subtle tricks to the place. At the final stall, both Murin and Cleo's eyes widened. A huge mythical rock lay in an enormous nest as though right at home. Dane pulled a large apple out of his sack, hanging from the far wall, and tossed it to the bird, which plucked the tasty morsel from the air. Dane reached in and stroked the creature's head. It seemed to purr like a cat, staring down into his eyes like a lifelong friend. "Good to see you, Marinin. You doing okay?" The creature bobbed its head, clearly understanding. Suddenly, pounding reverberated through the barn, echoing from the hallway door. "Guess that answers that question," Murin muttered. "Quick, get on!" Dane shouted, jumping onto a wooden stool and up onto the bird's back as though he were Fey himself. "Hurry!" Unsteadily, Murin followed his directions with Cleo guarding their path. The door shook, reverberated, then exploded. Wooden shards flew into the exotic barn, and Dane shouted, "Now!" Cleo leapt onto Marinin's back just as the stablemaster reached down and stepped on a lever. Red, flowing script was scrawled along its shaft, and as soon as it clicked into place, the building shook. Above, it appeared as though each stall had a spiraling tower. However, this particular one was giving way. A long metallic strip pulled free of the walls above, retracting. Layer after layer of the tower just disappeared into the walls. Marinin quickly leapt into the air, unfolding his great brown wings as they passed beyond the walls of the stablemaster's home. The sight of dark, hairy, humanoid creatures the size of powerlifters dwindled behind them. Dane watched as they scurried to find some place to hide as the building crumbled. He did not feel pity or even joy at their escape into the clouds above. As great fields of ancient trees and crops spread out below, he only felt remorse at having lost the one thing he had possessed for so long, his home. A short time later, Lord Riffelin stepped over the rubble of the shop, glowering at the human onlookers standing on the sidewalks. His black boots shone better than any soldier's, and the belted tunic and sash displayed his status. The symbols stitched into the cloth in gold were nothing anyone in this backwater town would recognize, nor likely anything military generals would know. However, the supreme confidence and leadership that wafted from his tall stature were enough to keep them away. There was nothing left of the old coffee/taxidermy shop to mundane eyes, but the shimmer where one wall once stood was a telltale sign. Lord Riffelin strode through and up the dark stairs. The hall of doors piqued his curiosity. He tried the first, but the doorknob crumbled in his grasp. The second did the same. Finally, he strode down the hall to where his mercenaries had vanished. The door had been torn from its hinges. All that remained in its place were old wooden planks. An old sheet of paper was tacked to its center. Placing a long claw upon its rough-cut surface, Lord Riffelin flinched from the shock. It was clear that this barrier was more formidable than it looked. Summoning a black dancing flame to see by, he read the script decorating the aged parchment. "Out to lunch," it read. The end. I hope you enjoyed my story, Out to Lunch. If you'd like to leave a comment or have some ideas about things you'd like to see, please leave them below the video. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Also, like, subscribe, and remember to click the bell to hear about upcoming videos. We have instructional videos and other short stories for you to enjoy. Again, I'm Weston Kincade. My books are below, so please follow the links if you'd like to explore them. Thanks for joining us, and remember, keep writing.